This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
If you said bad, then I don't know anything about him. If you said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't know. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President.
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead.
I mean, he kind of killed, I got to say. Like, he was getting some pretty big laughs in there. I think it was pretty impressive.
Trump?
Yeah. He's working the room.
Trump came out looking better and working the room. Is that how are you going to use that in your comedy performances now, your stand-up?
I mean, lots of people have mentioned, sometimes Trump is definitely, like most of the time Trump doesn't realize how funny he is. Like, he's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know it. But every now and again, to me, he reveals a level of comedy awareness in which he knows how to land.
You just have to respect the guy. You got to hand it to him. Great comic. One of the greatest.
He wouldn't be the first fascist comedian, who's out there. So yeah, he said, I don't like you and I probably never will, to Rudd. And it was pretty insane. He's like, I don't know who the fuck you're talking about. We've just negotiated this deal with Australia, but fucking Australia's ambassador is gone. He'd previously called Trump Rudd, rather, not the brightest bulb. Didn't know anything about him. So pretty brutal for Rudd there in front of everybody.
But then he obviously, he realizes who he is, right? And that's why he then goes,
yeah, I guess
I don't like you either. Or do you think he just throws that out there just because it's probably true?
Well, I also, people in Australia being like, wow, Trump doesn't like Kevin Rudd. I'm a bit like, I think he was kind of joking in there. Yeah, I think he knows it's a funny thing to say in front of everybody to the ambassador of Australia, sitting next to the Australian Prime Minister, I don't like you and I never will. I think there is a level of awareness there, no?
Well, and did you see I think the take on Is It We Used to Be Journos, that podcast, and they were like, this is such a setup for all of the fucking media class that just love this shit. Like, Kevin Rudd's probably loving it.
Right. It's
been set up by the journos who set it up by asking Trump, like, hey, basically, is there anything got anything spicy to say? Like, do you hate Australia because of climate? Do you hate him because of Gaza? Maybe you hate the ambassador? Just an idea? Like,
throw that out there.
Just hands it to him.
Well, apparently after the meeting, Rudd went up to Trump and apologized again as well. Like, just the fucking humiliation tour that this guy's had to be on.
Every poster's worst nightmare, right? Coming face to face with this person you were talking shit about online.
Oh, when I said that, I was like, yeah, I mean, I looked it up. I can't remember all the tweets, but this is from the ABC. Years earlier, Rudd had let rip about Trump in a series of tweets, the highlights of which including him calling him the most destructive president in history, a traitor to the West, and a man who drags America and democracy through the mud. Now,
it's pretty clear.
I mean,
pretty strong
and correct. And it's not like any evidence has emerged since then to disprove these kind of assessments of who Donald Trump is. No, Kevin Rudd is just a pathetic coward who would happily take the ambassadorship job and will happily suck up to our American imperial overlords. Sure, why not?
Everyone hates the popular girl until you get in the group.
Actually, once you get to know him, like once you get paid heaps of money to go to America as an ambassador and you actually talk to him, he's actually pretty cool.
Well, in this quote you put here, you said that Albanese years earlier described Trump as, quote, scaring the shit out of me.
Yes.
And it's the same thing. You can imagine Albanese sitting down with Trump and being like, you know what's funny is, like, I used to find you, I guess, intimidating. And Trump being like, me?
You're not that scary at all. I think you're great. Let's be friends.
Over the last couple of days, we've seen the coalition say that this legislation is too good for the environment. We've seen the Greens say that it's too good for business. It sounds to me like we've got the balance pretty right.
You have shit your pants.
Yeah, you just shit in your pants.
Smiles pompously. If both sides are criticising me, I must be doing something right.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Welcome to Serious Danger. This is a podcast about green politics in Australia. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's produced by Mike the Griffin, and I'm Emerald Moon, and that's Tom Ballard. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Emerald. Nice to see you again.
Hello. This is the 200th episode live. That's technically my last weekly show, but like this is kind of end of an era because this is my last sitting in my bedroom, Younger and Terrible Country mansion. This is the last classic weekly episode.
Classic.
So, yeah, extract it, hang it on the wall, listen carefully. My dears, we
appreciate every second.
Appreciate every second. Fuck, it better be good now. This week, we are talking about how the Labor government has ruled out inserting a climate trigger in their environmental laws. And we are breaking down the critique of Labor's 5% home deposit scheme. First of all, we have some new subscribers on our Patreon to thank. Patreon.com/seriousdangerau is where you'll find it. That is where you can sign up. It is $3 a month, or you can be a yearly member as well, save a few dollars there. And that's how we keep the show going, pay Mike's wages, ensure that we are independent and don't have ads. And we also put out a bonus episode every couple of weeks. That's where I will be sticking around after I finish with the weekly episodes. I'm still going to be on the Patreon, and we usually do a bit more kind of deep dives and analysis there outside of the weekly grind. So thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. We love you for it. We dearly appreciate it. And we would like to thank Luke, Will, and Nicola, who've signed up in the last week. Welcome to the family, Danger Dogs.
Danger Dogs. Next week we have our 200th episode. It is a live show, as we've mentioned. Now, last update I got from the venue, there are 3 tickets left, which is the most annoying amount left.
Don't let that be the case. Don't prevent us from being able to say that it's sold out, because 3 of you fuckers couldn't be bothered coming out on a Saturday afternoon to laugh along with us at the Comedy Republic.
You're telling me there's not a Melbourne-based throuple who listens to this fucking show? Come on. It's going to be 4 p.m. next Saturday afternoon. Will Anderson as our special guest. It is pretty much sold out. Thank you very much, everyone, for turning out. It's going to be fantastic. 200th episode celebration and a farewell to Emerald on the weekly app. We'd love to see you there. And just before we crack into the episode, we should acknowledge the fact that this week we learnt that the surfing senator will no longer be a senator.
Just a surfing.
I assume we'll do lots of
surfing guy. He's going to change his Instagram handle to
Fuck yeah!
Surfing
What
man.
about the handle? Peter Whish-Wilson is going to be finishing up in Parliament after 14 years in the big house, retiring in 2026. He'll be finishing up about mid-next year. Long protests to go through, figuring out amongst Tasmanian members who will be taking over. And I believe he's on a committee of some description that's still working through till next year. So still a fair bit of time. But yes, he's saying goodbye, won't be contesting the next election. And I have to say thank you, Peter Whish-Wilson, for not defecting to the Labor Party. We really appreciate that.
We do appreciate that.
And
thank you for standing up for the sharks
over the years.
Thank you for being a dude that just loves the beach. He just loves the beach, and I really respect that, and I hope he gets to spend lots of time there.
Yeah, no, I mean, came to Parliament as part of the campaign against the guns paper mill in Tasmania, which again, the environmental movement won. Always good to remember and celebrate our victories. Pretty staunch voice for Julian Assange. Yeah, a good dude. Sad to see you go, and excited to see who'll be taking. He took over from Bob Brown, by the way, back in 2012. So that was his particular Senate spot, and yes, a new one will be on the way.
Do we know who that might be? Are there people in the Tasmanian Greens probably know who's expected to be the front runner for that?
Tabitha Badger. I hope that's all my money's on.
Yeah, friend of the show.
Senator Badger.
Senator Badger. That's another great Instagram handle, actually.
I have a plan, sir.
Really, Baldrick? A cunning and subtle one?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. What is it?
A bill that is literally called the Environmental Protection Reform Bill. Now, I find it hard to believe that the Greens Party would not vote in favour of a bill that is literally called the Environmental Protection Reform Bill.
I see.
All right, well, we kicked off the week with a bit of a downer. If you care about, the planet that we live on and the environment and stuff, you would have been quite sad to read. The Earth has reached its first catastrophic tipping point linked to greenhouse gas emissions, with warm water coral reefs now facing a long-term decline and risking the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people, according to a new report. The Global Tipping Points Report, led by the University of Exeter and financed by the Fund of Amazon owner Jeff Bezos. All right. Includes contributions from 160 scientists from 87 institutions in 23 countries. It warns the world is also on the brink of reaching other tipping points, including the dieback of the Amazon, ironic, the collapse of major ocean currents, and the loss of ice sheets. Unless we return to global mean surface temperatures of 1.2 degrees and eventually to at least 1 degree as fast as possible, we will not retain warm water reefs on our planet at any meaningful scale.
Can I be honest? Like, surely a lot of people like me read this and are like, didn't we already hit? I feel like I've heard this many times. I feel like we've hit the tipping points, and particularly the reefs. No one thought we were keeping the reefs, did we? No one's still holding onto the reef.
I think the Labor government still thinks we're holding onto the reef.
As if.
It's not going to
They
die
might be
on our
saying
watch.
that. They might be saying that. Do we have, well, what are they going to save us, are they? They're going to cool the planet?
Yeah, well, it's fine.
Because they're not the
that's why
coalition.
I read that story. I was like, oh, that's terrible. But then I thought, no,
Yes.
hang on. We've got a Labor government and they care about the climate.
Thank God, because we kept Dutton out.
On Wednesday, the ABC reported a climate trigger that could be used to block coal and gas projects has been formally excluded from the government's overhaul of Australia's environmental laws, as confirmed by Environment Minister Murray Watt. The decision not to write a trigger into laws that could block projects that would worsen carbon emissions will anger the Greens. Update,
Yes,
that's true.
as a Greens, I'm angered.
And likely cut off that pathway for the government to pass its long-awaited rewrite of the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. All right, you weren't surprised by the corals dying? Were you surprised by this Labor saying no to a climate trigger?
Oh, actually, kind of. Like, I thought maybe surely we're at a point that they could be like, yeah, it makes sense that, like, the greatest existential threat to our ecosystem should be considered in our environmental laws. Not just considered, but be a potential cause for refusal of a project. But no, apparently not.
Hi, do I sound different? That's probably because we're having fucking technical issues. It's really annoying. So just a heads up that my sound may be a little bit different from here and in, but hopefully it still sounds lovely. Okay, enjoy. Now, was I surprised about Labor ruling out a climate trigger? Great question, Tom.
Thank you.
I like a little bit, yes, because I thought that maybe this is not a very difficult thing for them to just do in light of, I don't know, where the world is at. You would think maybe they're there by now. Clearly, they're so captured by the fossil fuel industry. I'm not to the point, too cowardly to do anything that the Greens have ever proposed. I feel like, do you think that that's it? Is it just because the Greens are associated with the term climate trigger?
Well, there's a good argument for that, seeing as a climate trigger was proposed by then Shadow Environment Minister Anthony Albanese in 2005, literally proposed a climate trigger in his Avoiding Dangerous Climate Change bill.
Wow, what a bill. Love to see that introduced.
The trigger, of course, is supported by Greenpeace, the Australian Conservation Foundation, and the Climate Council as well. So, but yeah, that's like, Greens do it. Greens say it's good, then it simply cannot happen. I don't know. I mean, you could argue like, them saying there's definitely not going to be a climate trigger bill could have been them talking a big game before going to these negotiations, but apparently not. Apparently they're really passionate about.
That's the hill they're going to die on, is the planet dying. Not bad.
Now, we're recording this on Friday morning. Now, the future of the legislation is somewhat in doubt, and how much more negotiation has to go is still a little bit TBC. We'll get to that. But for now, this is certainly on Wednesday, Thursday, the big story was Labor coming out and saying, no climate trigger, but here's what you will get instead. The government will force major projects to report their carbon emissions under the laws for the first time, as well as provide plans for how they intend to reduce those emissions to net zero by 2050. Projects expected to emit more than 100,000 tonnes of CO2 annually will be required to disclose in their project proposals expected emissions and their plan to reduce them. A little bit of forward planning, like a little bit of a...
Just tell us, let us know. You thinking about this stuff? That is so good to hear.
The biggest polluters are already required to do this under the Labor's safeguard mechanism, although there are a bunch of projects that aren't captured by that. I don't know why the fuck that's the case, but apparently they weren't, and now if these laws go through, they will be.
Okay, because that was my question, because I was like, isn't this just safeguard mechanism?
Yeah. No.
But it captures slightly more.
Yes, I couldn't tell you the criteria that means that some of these aren't touched by the safeguard mechanism, but under these wonderful new laws, they will be required to do so. By ensuring projects disclose their emissions for the first time, the public will know exactly what to expect from new projects and how they're accounting for our key climate policies. I already know what to expect from fossil fuel projects, Murray Watt. They are cooking the planet, you fucking idiot.
Yeah. Are they required to disclose the impact of their emissions on, I don't know, insurance prices, like heat waves, flooding,
coral reefs, yeah.
The impact on me?
Presumably, if it's similar to safeguard mechanism, of course, this is all scope 1 emissions as well. So also if they're a mining project or they're exporting stuff that will then be burnt in another country, that will not be included.
And to be clear, the proposal for a climate trigger is that the impact on global heating, so that would include scope 3 emissions, stuff burned overseas, would be considered in the decision. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, certainly when the Greens are talking about this, and I think when the Climate Council are talking about this, you would say the climate trigger would give the Environment Minister the ability to sort of say, because of the impact on the climate as a result of this project, not just the building of the actual project or the operation of the project, but the end result of digging up fossil fuels that will then be exported and burnt, will contribute to cooking the planet and making the climate crisis worse. So therefore, we cannot approve this particular project. That's, I think, the dream.
Yes, and I wouldn't have been surprised. Maybe what I thought is that Labor would do like a climate trigger, but it was just A, not called a climate trigger, and B, only the domestic emissions. But they're just not even giving the Department of the Government any ability to refuse a project on a climate basis.
No. And actually, we had some interesting correspondence about the efficacy of a climate trigger, which we'll get to in a moment as well. But yes, that's certainly the critique. I mean, projects under the Labor's proposed laws, they would have to disclose this amount, but it would not force decision makers to consider the climate impacts of these projects, meaning projects such as Woodside's Northwest Shelf Extension could still be approved under the new regime. Thank goodness.
Hello.
Sarah Hansard-Young told ABC's Afternoon Briefing, our concern is that even though they now have to say how much pollution they're going to create, the minister can't do anything with that. He doesn't have to consider it before he gives them a tick of approval. And that's just not fit for today's world when the environment is under huge stress.
And isn't the other big problem with these laws that Labor's latest shape is that the minister holds the final decision in the first place? Like, it probably shouldn't sit with a politician.
Yes, well, certainly the coalition wants to make sure that the EPA, any kind of environmental protection agency, couldn't do anything like get in the way of approving massive projects, because that would be terrible for investment, and they want the minister to still hang on to all that power, that sweet, sweet, juicy power.
Yeah, they want their money to still be good.
Yeah. Yes. Hang on, we pay this guy. He's not having the decision? Come on. Other parts of Labor's proposed environmental reforms include companies who breach these laws would be stripped of the profits made from the breach, penalties of up to $1.6 million on individuals and $825 million on businesses. Corporate offenders would be fined a maximum of either $16.5 million, 3 times the value of the benefit they derived from the breach, or 10% of the business's annual turnover, whichever is higher.
What kind of breach are we talking about? Are we talking about emitting more greenhouse gases than they told the government they would, for example, or failing to disclose how much they're... Yeah.
I guess this is for all breaches of the laws across the board, so not just focused on climate stuff.
Right.
I guess I guess if they don't disclose, as they would be required to under the law, that would technically be a breach. Whether they're making money out of that or necessarily, or indeed, my cynicism says these just penalties won't apply. Governments love announcing massive, really scary sounding penalties for corporations and very rarely actually following through and coming to an agreement. We see this with ASIC all the time. And they sort of say, well, we worked out a deal and actually they're really sorry about how all the bad stuff they did.
Yep.
Or these corporate fees do apply and they are a drop in the ocean compared to the massive profits being made by these corporations. So
yeah, the fee, it's the cost of business, as they said.
The laws will also include a new definition for what constitutes an unacceptable impact on the environment, which, if met, could result in a project being immediately refused. Industry does not like this. They're saying it's too vague and to say an unacceptable.
What is the definition?
Well, indeed. I guess we're yet to see that. We still haven't actually got the legislation.
Right.
But industry would like to know what is an acceptable impact on the environment and what's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess anything that gets in the way of profits is an acceptable impact, I assume. No, sorry. Strike that.
No, the other way around.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
The legislation will include a provision that requires developers to achieve a net gain for the environment. Well, that sounds good. Which could be achieved through the use of carbon offsets.
Which are totally real and good, and they work, as we know.
This was particularly crazy to me. Okay, the laws will create an emergency stop work power that would require developers to immediately cease actions potentially harming the environment. Oh, okay, cool. Early this month, senators were told a Queensland coal project accused of illegally clearing koala habitat had been allowed to continue development because the Environment Department had no authority to force it to stop work. The Gemini Coal Project in Dingo, central Queensland, is being investigated over the claim, but officials said existing laws do not give them power to order a stop work until a finding was made.
Yeah.
Reforms due to be introduced in Parliament in the next sitting fortnight will create emergency powers to respond to major contraventions of the law that create an imminent risk of serious harm to the environment or where the damage has already occurred. So again, the concern about the coal project is clearing koala habitat. Now, that's a bad thing, and we should stop that. That's sure. But if the coal project isn't doing that, but is still going ahead with the coal thing, we've still got a bit of an issue because you're still damaging the environment because burning coal is burning the fucking planet.
So you don't even care about the koalas, Carl?
I do care about the koalas, and I'd like to protect the koalas, but I also care about all human life on Earth for the next couple of centuries. That's also a concern of mine.
No, you're right.
So
I mean, but even yes, like the fact that they have to change this, like it is a little bit bizarre that you can like look at a project and be like, hey, I'm looking at you bulldoze trees and there are koalas over there.
Yes.
But who's to say whether you've breached, we have to investigate this first. And so we can't tell you to stop until you've done it. And then we can investigate whether you did it.
You did that. And we're going to fine you a couple of bucks. And yes, you can work that into, you can take that out of the profits. It'll be fun. So I mentioned the Graham Samuel review. It all really comes back to that. Have we talked about the Samuel review much on the show?
I'm sure we have, but to be honest, it's never really been clear in my mind. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Who is this guy? I think it's one of those ones where we've gone, we like it when it concurs with what we want. And then when it doesn't, we're like, he's untrustworthy.
Correct. Well done. I think you've summarized everything I've got here.
Okay.
This, if people don't know, this is a major review of the EPBC commissioned by the Morrison government in 2019, back when Susan Lee was Environment Minister. Said, go take a look at environmental laws. He hands down a report in 2021. He says our laws are broken, and he makes 38 recommendations. Now, again, I don't know Graham Samuel personally. I looked him up a little bit. He is a businessman. He's a lawyer. He was a former executive director of Macquarie Bank. He was chairman of the ACCC for a little while. He ran the investment banking advisory firm Greenhill Caliburn. He's done lots in sports admin. He's got lots of honours and awards, quite an eminent Australian on lots of fronts, I suppose you would say. But as far as I can tell, has no experience or qualifications when it comes to environmental science or the
Is this the thing where they're like, no, there's a business side and there's an enviro side and neither of them can agree, so we need an objective party who has no idea. Like, although maybe not because he's just on the business side. But
and look, again, I have not read the Samuel review. I started reading it and it was extremely boring, even in the recommendations section. So, and I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff in the Samuel review that yes, we totally agree with or what have you. But it is interesting. This is a coalition commissioned, businessman-led review into our environmental laws. They came up with 38 recommendations. Murray Watt would say the Samuel review did not recommend a climate trigger. and did recommend this disclosure requirement on projects. So they're sort of citing, hey, look at this SAMR review. This is where it's coming from.
Didn't it recommend an independent EPA though?
It sure did.
Watchdog?
It sure did. And this is the Wilderness Society's summary of some of these recommendations. Also recommended implementing legally binding national environmental standards that clearly protect wildlife, critical habitat, and world and national heritage. End dangerous exemptions for destructive practices like native forest logging. Establish an independent watchdog, as you said, to enforce these laws, to protect nature and communities, not vested interests, and strengthen community rights so we can meaningfully participate in decisions about protecting our environment and legal rights to challenge bad or poorly made decisions. Now, again, that's the Wilderness Society's summary of the recommendations, but interesting. Sure. Of course, the read you would get from the political class is we need to speed up approvals and there's just too many steps, too many legal challenges, and there's all these people and democracy getting in the way of us helping our corporate mates and trashing the environment. So we really need to cut that out, where it seems like that's not quite the full story from the SAMR review. Yeah,
it sounds like the SAMR review is, like people can cherry pick from it and be like, and that's exactly what he said, or like, but you're not doing these other things that he said.
Right. The Greens have responded furiously to the proposed overhaul on Wednesday. We need environment laws to protect our forests and the climate. These laws do neither. They are not worth the paper they're printed on, Greens Environment spokesperson Sarah Hanson-Young said. The Greens have been very clear from the start. We will not rubber stamp laws that fail to protect our native forests, wildlife and climate. While industry will no doubt say they haven't got enough, their grubby fingerprints are all over it. These laws are written to help big business and the mining companies at the expense of nature. It will take us backwards and is worse than the status quo.
Really? That's interesting.
Pretty spicy. Fighting words from Sarah
Is
Hanson.
It back? Yeah. What? So which parts take us backwards? Which parts are worse than the status quo?
What would the Greens argue there? Well, I suppose the idea that, or is it the status quo? Interesting. I mean,
Is it the go zones? Because is one of the key planks of this, the no-go and the go zones, but basically implying back checks and balances and community consultation for everything in particular areas.
Yeah. Speeding the red tape. I mean, you could argue it's worse than status quo because the trade-offs, for that stuff, the concessions for business are not worth the apparently pro-environment trade-offs, things like disclosing emissions and laying out your little plan as to how to reduce them. And again, I didn't see any coverage or conversation around native forest logging, which we know is another major demand for the Greens. So if, there are no further protections in there or closing those loopholes that the SAMR review talks about, the Greens could argue that, you're moving forward with environmental protection laws that gives just way too much to capital,
Yeah, I mean, that statement from Sarah Hanson-Young certainly seems to be like that's a pretty clear denouncement of the laws. And when she's saying we will have been clear, we're not going to rubber stamp these, it seems to be signaling an intention to potentially block them, right?
Yes. Well, I think that, you would understand the Greens being pretty forthright. Both, there's a lot to be angry about here and it's bullshit, and the gap between Labor's rhetoric and their actions here, should be called out. But also negotiations are not over, right? So you would still be saying, there's still a fair gap. We still need more concessions before we would consider passing this. Now, initially, you might say, well, that's irrelevant because it looked like the coalition were pretty happy and they were going to be on board, and Labor was going to be able to get this through with the coalition. They were celebrating the removal of the climate trigger, and the Shadow Environment Minister, Angie Bell, who I have never heard of, but there you go. I guess the new coalition involves a whole bunch of fresh faces being promoted.
Fresh faces, that's right. Well, because she's a woman, Tom.
Yeah.
I think women becoming ministers.
I don't like it. And I forget any woman that I'm introduced to, immediately forget. She was like, oh, it's great that they've dismissed the idea that the EPA would have more power and that all the power would be invested in the Environment Minister. Now, according to Guardian Australia, the government has not confirmed that. So a little bit of confusion as to exactly how much they've got there. But as of Friday morning, when we're recording this, it seems that the government is going to have to do something. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. After weeks of signalling she was open to a deal with Labor, the opposition leader, Susan Lee, all but ruled out the option on Thursday as she railed against the environmental proposals she dubbed a basket case, a red light for jobs, and a handbrake on investment. Among the opposition's concerns, which were shared by sections of the mining industry, wow, that's so crazy. Jinx. Was a new definition for an unacceptable impact on the environment, which would trigger immediate refusal of a project. They don't like that. These environment laws appear to, like, in some small ways, in some specific incidents, protect the environment. We can't be having that. The coalition also included the new requirement for proponents to achieve a net gain for the environment and bigger penalties for breaches among a list of grievances, with what Shadow Minister Abel described as nature positive 2.0. So again, even the fucking, perhaps these even
Here
very potential, dog shit, minimal concessions to the environment may well be on the chopping block from here.
Mm-hmm. And what's Labor's response to this? Is it, well, the Greens had better get on board if they don't hate the environment, or?
It seems that way. It's a matter for both the Coalition and the Greens to decide whether they're prepared to support these reforms. I think it would be very unfortunate if the Greens were to proceed with not supporting these laws, which now require proponents for the first time to disclose their emissions. There will be different views about this. I'm sure there will be many parts of this legislation that people support, and there will be parts they disagree with as well. But what we have tried to do is deliver a balanced package that delivers real gains for the environment and real gains for business. Finally, some gains for business.
Finally, they're struggling, guys. Come on, won't someone think of the business?
I mean, again, centrist brain, full blown centrist tumor in this man's brain.
Everyone's going to hate this, and that's why we are strong.
And so divorced from the reality of the situation. The planet is on fucking fire. We're losing the fucking corals. No compromise balance package. No, take on your corporate overlords, Murray Watt. Have a fucking backbone. Be the environment minister and think about the fucking environment, you weirdo.
But this is his brand, right? And and you're exactly right. It's like, this isn't the fucking, like, business efficiency and productivity acts. Like, these are the environment laws.
Yes.
So they're actually not meant to be about, like, equally weighting profits versus environmental protection. Surely the chief objective of them is to protect the environment.
Yeah.
Just a crazy thought.
Have a looky little title there, Murray. Look down and be like, oh shit, that's right. I'm supposed to be fighting for the environment. Whoopsies. So what do you think the coalition strategy there is? Are they sort of like, well, we've got all these concessions. Labor's already capitulating on fucking super. They're scared. They're weak. They're pathetic. We can push further on this. We know how much the Labor would hate the look of having to negotiate with the Greens to actually get their environmental laws through. Let's go for gold. Let's try and knock out any requirements, anything that might say to business, you can't do this profitable thing for the sake of the environment.
Well, was it primarily about getting Labor to fight with the Greens instead, again, so that everyone's focusing on that rather than the coalition?
Yeah. God. Surely they wouldn't be that cynical. Surely they want a legislative outcome in this.
Surely.
What should the Greens do then in this scenario?
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it does just seem like you can't just wade through what Labor has proposed. Unless the Liberals were, like, actually offering something that would mean that it would pass, that would make it way worse. If the Liberals just vacate a space, then the Greens should go for gold. Do you reckon that, like, Labor's more likely to make concessions on climate or forests, or probably just something else?
With the Greens? Yeah, I think it's just much more
Can't
likely
predict
the coalition will get on board. I mean, there is nothing, as far as I can say, there is nothing in these fucking laws. I mean, these laws are so business friendly. There's nothing in these laws that industry is seriously going to lose their minds over. I mean, they'll pretend to, of course. They will project the idea and they'll fight for anything they can possibly get, and any reforms that restricts their freedom as capital to do whatever the fuck they want to do, they will make a song and dance about. But ultimately, this is just nowhere near anything like the laws that we need in order to protect our environment in the face of the assaults on the planet, for God's sake.
Yeah, it sounds like they will get Labor to remove this unacceptable outcome or unacceptable impact provision or water it down somehow, and then they'll be good to go.
I mean, it's the CPRS, except Tony Abbott doesn't take over from Malcolm Turnbull, right? So Labor negotiates with the coalition. They don't want to deal with the Greens, so they negotiate with the coalition to water down and make these environmental laws worse. And in CPRS, Tony Abbott takes over Malcolm Turnbull, and so they say we're not going to vote for these laws. So to me, it's like that, except that bit doesn't happen. So you just get the shittier environmental laws passed with the support of the coalition, and the Greens are left in the cold.
Yay.
Now, last point I want to make here. This was an interesting email we got from listener Liz back in June when we were talking about Watt's decision to approve the Northwest Shelf gas expansion. I thought this was worth sharing. I'm a big fan of the show and love listening to your latest episode on the Northwest Shelf extension decision. I'm a law academic at Melbourne Law School, as well as a long-time member of the Greens. I think you mentioned at one point that the minister wasn't allowed to consider the climate impacts of the project. That's actually not fully correct, and it's a line that is being used to deflect responsibility for that decision. In terms of the logic of this kind of legislation, it's really ironic. The way that this kind of legislation is designed is intended to force ministers to explicitly consider certain factors and make the reasoning on those factors public, so that the public can in turn hold executive decision makers to account through political processes. There isn't currently a requirement to consider the effects of climate impacts, i.e. a climate trigger, but it is open to the minister to choose to do so. In technical terms, it's not an irrelevant consideration. There's also past practice. Environment ministers like Plibersek considering climate impacts because of their indirect impacts. For example, in litigation a couple of years ago, an environment group in Queensland was unsuccessful in challenging Plibersek's approval of a couple of projects because she reasoned that the impact on climate harms and therefore the project was minimal compared to all the other emissions in the world. Wow.
Sorry, that just makes me so jokified. I just...
This is sometimes called the drop in the ocean argument in litigation, and that the international market might adapt anyway if we didn't export the coal in that case.
Yeah, drug dealers defense.
Drug dealers defense, market substitution agreement. The climate trigger wouldn't really solve this problem. The court won't pull up the minister for this kind of reasoning unless it's considered irrational, and that's a massively high threshold to meet. So even if we had a climate trigger, the minister could still approve these projects running on the same lines we see politically. For example, if we don't export it, others will. It's small on the scale of other emissions. TLDR, Watt could have taken climate into account for the decision back in June. Ministers have before. And if Woodside had sued on the grounds that this was an irrelevant consideration, that would have been a legally shaky argument. We also need more than a climate trigger alone to solve this problem. Liz then went on to say that actually one of her concerns was that Labor would actually pass the climate trigger close to the next election. So it looks like they've done something, but they would still approve these projects, but then can say, we did consider the climate impact and it's all good. So we have a climate trigger and the project still goes ahead, which is clearly not what the Greens are envisioning when we're talking about, or the environment movement when we're talking about fighting for a climate trigger.
Yeah, I think the thing about a climate trigger is like the part of me that stupidly still sometimes thinks that maybe laws work and democracy, government works, is like, well, it makes sense that the list of things that the minister should consider would include climate. That seems like something that just it's outdated, that it's not included in the laws that they have to consider. And so obviously it should be included. But then, when you take it a step further, when you're like, okay, and then how do ministers use those considerations that they are required to run through when they're assessing a project? And how does that usually turn out? And they minimize the impact, or they come up with some sort of argument as to why it can still proceed because they are bought and sold by corporate interests, and they do not care about the environment. And so then you like come back and you're like, oh, that's right. That's right. Really what you need is not like better laws. It's like a whole different system, or at least like a Greens and stuff.
Yes, it's because when politicians write these laws, they're never going to pass laws that like tie their hands in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, because politicians always want as many options open to them because they would hate to be in a position in which they have to make a difficult moral choice or stand by what is clearly the right thing to do. No. They need lots of options open to them. So of course, it's like, you pass a Human Rights Act and then every law down the fact has to be, run by the Human Rights Act. And surprise, surprise, every government finds a way to justify that the laws they're passing, even though any ordinary person would say they clearly violate the Human Rights Act, they can sort of say, no, we think it's fine because of this. We won't restrict ourselves. We're going to pass this and approve it because we're cretinous fools who believe in nothing.
Yeah. Fuck 'em.
Next election, don't vote for a politician, everybody. Stop.
Happy, the ball itself has its own energy, or life force, if you will. Its natural environment is in the hole. So why don't you send him home? His bags are packed. He's got his airplane tickets. Bring him to the airport. Send him home.
Send him home. I just send him home. It's time to go home there, ball.
Son of a bitch, Ball. Why didn't you just go home? That's your home! Are you too good for your home? Answer me!
So the failed Labor and Greens candidates are fighting. They're fighting over Labor's expanded 5% home deposit guarantee scheme. Of
Has
course.
Max got a job, by the way? Is Max working?
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. Yeah.
All right.
Um,
At the Chifley Institute, I assume?
Yeah, definitely. That's right. For those who missed it, on the very same day this week, we got two very different pieces, analysing Labor's 5% home guarantee scheme, the home deposit scheme that allows buyers to purchase with as little as a 5% deposit, and then the government guarantees the rest, so the deposit, so they don't have to pay lender's mortgage insurance. They lifted the caps and expanded it, blah-de-blah. That came into effect in October. We've spoken about it on the show. On the same day, Max Fennell-Mather, for the former Greens member Griffin and housing spokesperson, published one article on it saying that it was shit for first home buyers, shit for renters, and great for the banks. Emma Dawson, who is a Labor person, she's a Labor-aligned think tank person. We can explain further who she is in a minute. If you don't know, she published an article on why the criticism of the scheme, including from the Greens, but also from the right somewhat, is bullshit. And actually it's great, and Labor is fighting for us, and everyone should shut up. I thought initially that when you told me that these two articles had come out, I was like, oh, Max has published his article and then Emma Dawson has published hers, or the other way around. But I love that they both published at the same time. Isn't that cute?
They sort of, yes. I thought Emma Dawson was responding to Max's piece as well, but no, these are separate. They just happen to come out on the same day. It seems that Dawson is primarily responding to Greens' criticisms in the public, in the media, and also in the modelling or the task they put through the parliamentary library, right, to sort of model the impact of this scheme.
Yeah, that's right. So Emma Dawson, we've spoken about her before on the show. She's a former Rudd and Gillard advisor, friend of Tom's podcast, I believe. Yes.
She did let me into her house and talk to me. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Former executive director of the Labor-aligned think tank Per Capita, and now the executive director of another Labor-aligned think tank, the Chifley Research Centre. Sorry.
I think, isn't the Chifley Research Centre Labor's actual think tank?
Oh, the one that's like attached to them in the way that the Greens is attached to.
I believe so.
I believe Chifley is the one. It's the same as the Chifley Institute, right? They're the same thing as Chifley Research Centre. It's an institute. Yeah. Yeah, it's Labor's think tank that they get funding for or whatever. Emma Dawson.
Sorry.
What?
I'm just on the Chifley Research website, and they've got like who we are, and it's like all these photos of people. And the third photo in is a woman, and the pixelation on this photo is extraordinary. they've got to get a high res for Laura Fraser Hardy. It's really cringe. Sorry, carry on.
Great material for a podcast. Love that. Emma Dawson, also the would-be member for Melbourne. If she had stuck around until the tides had turned and kicked out Anne Bant, she could be in Parliament right now. So she's stuck writing articles for the AFR. She withdrew, if we recall, from the 2021 pre-selection for Labor in Melbourne at the time. And I guess respect to her, but there was some talk about maybe it wasn't her stated reason, which was that she disagreed with Labor's decision to support the stage 3 cuts. So notionally a Labor left economics person.
Yep.
Shall we read her article? in the AFR this week.
Please. I love to read.
So it begins, and I just love this. This is the opening of the article. Weeks after opening, it seems the Albanese government's expanded first home guarantee scheme is a hit.
Extra. Everyone's talking about it. The first home guarantee scheme. Get on board. It's a hit.
Yeah. I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, I feel as though what has been very interesting about this scheme is that normally first home buyer schemes are generally just like popular and nobody critiques them.
Yes.
And everyone's like, great. And it's actually mainstream criticism of this policy and the fact that it's inflationary and won't really help anyone. I've found that really interesting, to be fair. So I think it's a little bit ironic to open your article saying everyone wants it.
I mean, we said on the show when we were talking about the shittiness of the scheme, of course it's still going to be popular. Of course people are going to get any government benefit whatsoever to help them enter our cooked housing scheme. We know that.
Yeah.
But that's not the job of like economists or politicians who are supposed to take a systemic view and step back and think, hang on, is this actually going to get to the heart of the problem that we're talking about and trying to address?
I think, to be fair to Emma, when she says it's a hit, she probably means lots of people are trying to use it. And this is true.
Yes, but I'm saying we all knew that.
Yeah. And she does then say, quote, equally predictably, the initiative is subject to fierce criticism, with opponents describing it as, quote, a cruel illusion or a, quote, sick joke. Do you know who said what?
No.
Who said that it was a sick joke? So Barbara Pocock said that it was a sick joke. That's the Greens' current housing spokesperson. The cruel illusion actually didn't come from the left or the Greens. That comes from economists, quote unquote economists, cited in the AFR, actually.
Right.
But again, we're saying that it's going to increase house prices. And I think, maybe just kind of keep that in mind as we continue the discussion, because it gets a bit confusing whose critiques she is refuting in this article.
Yep.
And I think this paragraph sums up the article. She says, quote, much of this condemnation is coloured by vested interests, both political and pecuniary, and it ignores the purpose of the scheme and its policy design in the context of Australia's exorbitant home price. So we'll come back to that. So first, her argument is...
Hang on. Just the idea that like political vested interest. Okay, so the implication is that, of course, the political critique has nothing to do with solving the problem or addressing the issue. It's just the Greens want to get political capital for criticising the scheme. Of course, Emma Dawson has no political vested interest in defending this policy or supporting the Labor Party, of course. She's focused on wonderful solutions for these great problems.
Exactly.
But anyone, and you can't possibly imagine that the Greens might sincerely believe that we should change things to make the housing market more fair. They have vested
not
interest.
just that. She actually, and I was going to get to this later, but what she argues in the article is that the Greens have no interest in helping poor people because they'll never vote for the Greens.
Brilliant.
That's her argument. That's really great stuff. In fact, she says specifically young working class and migrant people. Yep. And it's like, who are the young working class voting for? I think that's like the biggest part of the Greens voter base. But anyway.
Yeah.
She says in this article, first of all, she's like, yes, okay, the policy will increase house prices. I admit that. There's modelling that says that, but it's only by a little bit. And importantly, it's not by as much as the broader speculative investment in the housing market is increasing house prices. So it's like, yes, it's bad. This is the argument. Yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad as you say in my article about why criticism that the thing that's meant to be good is bad is actually bad.
Yep.
Anyway, and then it's like, yes, it's bad, but what about the other thing that's bad? Why is nobody talking about that? Why won't anyone in Parliament talk about the fact that speculative, your system that treats housing as a speculative opportunity and not a right is driving up prices and ruining people's ability to get in. Why won't anyone talk about this?
Why won't someone talk about that? But we don't need to talk about it because Labor is addressing that. We all know that Labor is absolutely going after property speculation, taking on property investors. We know that. And no one would critique the Labor's 5% home deposit scheme because it fails to address something like property speculation. No, don't worry about that. But Labor's on that. Labor's on that.
No one's talking about this thing. She says, quote, it's only when a government steps in to try to level the playing field for people who are genuinely making their way on their own, that bootstraps discourse, that the commentator class arcs up. Sorry, commentator class? You? You work for a think tank. You can't be the commentator class when you work for a think tank. Come on, we are the commentator class, babe. Like, sorry. Much of the angst pouring forth from property investment advisors and insurance experts is due to the impact on the lucrative private lenders' mortgage insurance market. Which brings us to what she's getting to. What she says is the purpose of the scheme that its critics just don't understand. She says, let's make one thing clear. The first home guarantee is a policy unashamedly aimed at reducing inequality in the housing market. Mm-hmm. This is demonstrated by the fact that it includes special provisions for single parents who can access the scheme with just a 2% deposit, 98% mortgage. It's a direct intervention in the market to restore the opportunity to own a home to those who don't have family wealth to draw upon, most of whom are first-generation immigrants and people from working-class backgrounds. So the question has to be asked, if that's the purpose of the scheme, is it working? What will this scheme do for those people? Because the answer, based on all of the modelling that we have and all of the experts who've looked at this, is that yes, they may get a chance. Some people may get a chance if they're really quick to get a mortgage sooner. If you've got a 5% deposit saved, if you had that ready in October, you could potentially get in to the market sooner than you might have otherwise. Then you get in with a bigger debt, which means most benefit goes to the banks, and prices rise overall, which means the most benefit goes to those who already own property. Which is just so ironic because Emma Dawson sets up this article by being like, what people don't understand is that the housing market is really cooked and it's a key driver of the inequality crisis. And like a whole lot of the wealth that is sitting with the top 1% or whatever is because they own land and they're able to leverage that. And the housing crisis is a huge driver of that. And it's like, that is literally the criticism of this scheme, is that it's going to drive up property prices, which means those who already have that kind of capital benefit the most, not going back to the people who are genuinely making their way on their own, not the first and second generation immigrants, people from working class backgrounds, people who don't have the bank of mum and dad. No, then it's not working. If that's the purpose of the scheme, it's not working.
The housing market concentrates too much wealth in the wealthy, and we're going to take them to task by increasing the asset price, the price of their assets. Then you'll all see.
Yeah, you'll see. So she says, okay, in light of this being, about reducing equality, it was, quote, galling to see a political attack on the program from the Greens.
Imagine.
And this is, the headline of her article, I should have said, is that Greens are misrepresenting facts about Labor's first home guarantee, claims low-income earners are being recklessly pushed into home loans they can't afford, are ludicrous in the extreme.
Oh, no.
And to be clear, yes, we're not talking necessarily about Chandler-Mather's article that came out on the same day. This is about the Greens using parliamentary library research that compared the cost of a mortgage on the median house price in Australia to the income of a single worker on an award wage to illustrate the potential scale of debt that low-income people could get pushed into if they use this scheme.
Right.
Emma Dawson says, quote, no single income first home buyer is purchasing the median Australian home, let alone a family house worth over $1.4 million with a 5% deposit and government support. No bank would lend $1.33 million to a sales assistant on $71K a year. The Greens attack is complete nonsense and no one should take it the slightest bit seriously.
Interesting.
And I think there is, her point is a little bit valid here. If you think that the Greens, if this was the government or someone trying to portray this as a successful policy and they use this example and then were like, oh, actually, it puts them in a lot of debt. But the point of the Greens' argument, I think, is that single income first home buyers can in no way dream to afford the median Australian home. And this policy does not help them. This policy does not work in the way that it's supposedly meant to. right? Like if it's, again, if we go back to it's about helping poor people, it's about helping lower income people, then it's failed.
Yeah.
She says in this article, I'll just go on a little bit further. She says the typical first home buyer, this is nonsense because the typical first home buyer is a mid-30s couple borrowing less than $500,000 for an urban unit or a small regional house. And it's like, yeah, that's the case at the moment. So fuck the single income buyers that we are, like, I thought we cared about poor people. We cared. And like, fuck the expectation that maybe you could own a home a little bit earlier or in a place that you want to live in. It's like, this is the reality. I acknowledge the system is cooked, but in not just only confining your modeling to the situation that I acknowledge is cooked, your argument is stupid.
Yes, I guess the Greens modelling is premised on the idea that it's reasonable to expect that ordinary people should be able to afford the median house or the median dwelling, right? Like if you're an ordinary person or on something like the median income, then yes, it's not ridiculous to expect to be able to afford that. But of course, our cooked housing system, which to Emma Dawson's credit, I do believe, she acknowledges and she knows how cooked it is and she wants to do something about it. Let's take all that level of good faith there. But the modelling exposes just how ridiculous that is and how lacking the first home deposit scheme is in actually seriously addressing this issue.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a straw man argument, right? Because it's like Emma Dawson the tone of the whole article is the Greens' critiques are bullshit.
Yep.
But then she takes this one argument and is like, well, that argument's ridiculous because it would never happen. But it's like, okay, have you actually responded to the position of the Greens, which is that this policy does not help the people that it purports to, and it will likely make the housing crisis worse by driving up house prices? No, you haven't responded to that. I mean, yes, the only argument is it'll now only take a few years to save a deposit. But meanwhile, never mind that the quote average home buyer that she's referring to, this the data that we have from last year about who is the average home buyer, I would be willing to get to bet would already be out of date due to skyrocketing house prices, which this policy will make worse. And Labor is doing nothing about. That's a key point. Your Labor government is doing nothing about. In the last year, so this is the September figures nationally, home prices, not just house prices even, have risen 4.8% across the board. In Brisbane, 8.8%. In Darwin, 12.9% in the last year. And we also have evidence already coming out, literally the day before Emma published this article, there is an article in the same publication in the AFR entitled First Home Buyer Urgency Fuels Auction Action. That's hard to. About 2,662 homes went to auction in Australia this week, the highest number since the last week of May. Because, wouldn't you know it, all of the investors were scrambling to get in, and all of the first home buyers were fucking scrambling to get in before the government's first home buyer scheme pushes up prices even further.
Great.
So we know we already have the evidence that this is happening, and it's just going to get worse. Which brings me to Emma's kind of really targeted stab, the most kind of targeted stab at the Greens and at Max Chandler-Mather in this article, where she says, quote, even after the electoral defeat of chief snake oil salesman Max Chandler-Mather owned, the Greens apparently remain happy to misrepresent that. It's just another attempt to stymie Labor's efforts to assist young working class and migrant Australians to build some wealth and security by a party that sees no electoral benefit in helping a cohort that is unlikely to vote for it.
Brilliant.
Simply bullshit. I mean, if we're talking about misrepresenting facts, but okay.
I know the Labor folks, they've just forgotten, given up on reading polls or any kind of analysis of actual voting data. They're like, no, only rich university students and rich people vote for the Greens. The end.
Yeah.
We are the party of the working class.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is a little bit. It's absurd, I think, to claim the Greens don't have any. Their housing policies aren't about helping renters, first home buyers, young people, working class people. I think surely at this point it is accepted that the Greens are the only ones actually who have proposed policies that would bring down housing.
Well, yeah, hang on. Wasn't the other critique that, Max is ridiculous because he wants to introduce rent caps on people and like we made ourselves the party of the renters. Like we talked about that endlessly. But of course, no, we have no interest in any of those people. First-time buyers, what are they doing right now? They're fucking renting. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they are. The final paragraph of this article says, quote, working class people and single parents should be trusted to make financial decisions without the constant carping condescension from those who are fortunate enough not to need the government in the corner just to get a foothold on the ladder to the great Australian dream.
Oh, God.
Yeah, those young mid-30s, like the young people who are also in their mid-30s, because that's the only people we're talking about, because that's the average first home buyer. Who are buying a more expensive home with a bigger debt. Anyway, but before that, she says, quote, our housing challenge and the growing wealth divide in our once egalitarian country is serious, and it should be taken seriously by those given the privilege to represent Australians in Parliament. So,
okay, well, Max doesn't have that privilege anymore, so he doesn't have to be serious about it.
So he doesn't have to take it seriously.
Checkmate, Emma Dawson.
Yeah, but I guess Barbara Pocock does, and so she shouldn't be saying that this is a sick joke. Because, I don't know, but hey, okay, what is Labor doing about it then? This serious housing challenge, the growing wealth divide. Because if we come back to what I said, that paragraph that sets up Emma's key points, there's 3 key points. She's like, the criticism comes from vested interests. Nonsense. Like, I mean, yes, it's politics. What are you talking about? They don't understand the purpose of the scheme. If the purpose of the scheme is to reduce inequality, the cause of which you said is primarily speculation driving up house prices, this policy doesn't address it and, in fact, may fuel it. And she says they don't understand the context of exorbitant home prices, which this policy makes worse. And a reminder, we've mentioned this, I think we mentioned this actually the last time we spoke about this, ironically, with Max Chandler-Mather about this deposit scheme when it was announced. Do the major parties want house prices to go up? Yes, they are on record saying so. Peter Dutton at the time, as the coalition leader, said, quote, I want them to steadily increase. And Claire O'Neill, the Labor housing minister, said, quote, our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to rise sustainably.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Appreciate that. Anthony Albanese, during the last debate, said negative gearing is a good thing. So it's not even they've just said we're not going to reform it anymore. He actually thinks it's good because he is, let us all remember, a landlord prime minister.
Absolutely. And so what Emma Dawson does really talk about that I think we do just want to briefly touch on in this article is a point. We made this briefly in our episode with Shane Bratton very recently, and this is the key kind of point of Max Chandler-Mather's article for Deep Cut News, which we'll link in the show notes, of course, which is that who wins the biggest from this policy? It's the banks.
Banks.
His article says Labor's latest 5% house deposit scheme, hot housing policy, bit clunky, Max, expanding the Liberals' home guarantee scheme, is a policy for bank profit, not first home buyers. It creates a new state-backed incentive for first home buyers to take out larger loans. And it's probably best actually that people just don't read the article rather than me trying to read out all these figures, but he talks about the modelling on how much extra interest the banks will get as a result of this policy. He says that the average first home buyer will pay an extra $141,268 in interest. And in total, first home buyers will pay banks an extra $24 billion in interest off the back of the first 5 years of the policy alone, which is absolutely insane. And fuck the banks. And we probably should get back to talking more about fuck the banks. Because they kind of get a bit scot-free. It is that, it's funny how the banks are just so fucking cooked and we sort of know that we hate them, but everyone's like, well, what you going to do? The banks. What can we say?
Well, we could have a people's bank. We could have a public bank. We could return the Commonwealth Bank to public ownership, that would provide terms and help people facilitate their finances rather than gouge them for profit left, right and centre. But of course, that's an unserious proposition.
Totally unserious. So silly. Come on, take this seriously, guys. Take this really seriously. If you were going to take the housing crisis, the inequality crisis seriously, you might perhaps break down the underlying causes and what the solutions might be.
Yes.
Max actually does do that in this article. He talks about the deregulation of the banking and financial system, divestment from public housing or not building enough public housing and sell-offs, and the capital gains tax discount being introduced by Howard, getting us to a situation where Australians own trillions of dollars in debt to multinational banking corporations And he then lays out 3 very clear ways that you could actually attack or undermine a speculation-driven housing system. Phase out negative gearing in the capital gains tax discount, limit rent increases, and build public housing.
Yep.
Wasn't that hard, was it?
And making that case would be a lot better use of everyone's time in the AFR. I mean, the Greens don't have power, Emma. This policy has been passed, okay? Maybe just take the win and talk about the shit that needs to be done to seriously address the housing crisis. But no, maybe not so much.
That's a good point.
That would involve publicly criticising the Labor Party. Can't do that. Need to talk about Max, a guy who's literally out of Parliament. Like, he's gone, But no, this is the most important focus of your writing is a contribution.
That's so true, yeah. It does seem like a shame that someone who does, I mean, the fact that she said, she's publicly opposed Labor's decision on statutory tax cuts, and she has spoken about tax reform in the housing market. Like, when you do support these things, why are you spending your time just trying to convince people that anyone who attacks Labor is wrong and Labor's okay? Like, come on, is that really what you're here for?
Yeah. It's just defense. It's just, everything's fine, everyone. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. I don't know if maybe there's an argument that it's unfair to expect Anna to do that kind of analysis or work in the AFR. It would never get run there. But also, like, if you're not going to do that, don't bother. Do something worthwhile. Actually, don't. Like, I don't care whether you're published in the AFR or not. Anyway.
One of Emma's previous contributions to the AFR, centrist Joe Biden is the president that we need. He did such a great centrist genocide. I thought that was really good. He really rolled out that genocide from the center, which was really impressive.
Both sides, everyone hates us. That's how we know it's right.
I'll bet that you've never even heard of the person who is credited as being the smartest person who has ever lived.
Now, I find it hard to believe that the Greens Party would not vote in favour of a bill that is literally called the Environmental Protection Reform Bill.
Well, that's our show. Thank you for listening to the 199th episode of Serious Danger. I can't wait to see all of you at the live show, those who are coming. Like we said, if there are still tickets available when you're listening to this, please, and you can come to the show in Melbourne on whatever.
1st of November.
It's a Saturday, 4 p.m. Please do. Please come. And otherwise, I don't know. Go get outside. Look at the world. Look at the trees and nature, or it's gone.
And say bye-bye. Follow us on social media at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We love that. You can email us anytime. hello@seriousdangerpod.com. Thank you to Mike. So great that we got our 199th episode with technical difficulties. I think it's a beautiful tribute to recording this goddamn show from home.
Yeah.
See you next week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.